The crystal chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 stars above the crowded ballroom in Victoria Island, Lagos. Sandra Collins moved quickly between the tables, balancing a heavy tray of champagne glasses. Her feet ached in the borrowed shoes, and sweat gathered on her forehead despite the air conditioning. She had been working for 12 hours straight, but she couldn't complain. Every naira she earned tonight would go toward her mother's hospital bills. The mansion belonged to Michael Daniels, the owner of Daniels Holdings and one of the richest men in Nigeria. Tonight, he was hosting a gala for Lagos's most powerful people. Sandra watched them laugh and dance in their expensive clothes, living in a world she could only dream about. She was invisible to them, just another server in a white shirt and black pants. "More champagne here," a woman called out, snapping her fingers rudely. Sandra hurried over with a smile she didn't feel. As she poured the drink, she noticed a tall man watching her from across the room. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, and his dark eyes seemed to follow her every movement. She recognized him immediately, Michael Daniels himself. Her hands trembled slightly and she quickly looked away. When her shift supervisor told her to take empty glasses to the kitchen, Sandra was relieved to escape the crowded ballroom. She walked down a quiet hallway, her tray piled high with dirty dishes. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed her arm and pulled her into a small side room. Sandra gasped and nearly dropped her tray. She spun around to find Michael Daniels standing there, his face filled with desperation she had never seen on a rich man before. "Please, I need your help," he said urgently, closing the door behind them. "Sir, I have to get back to work," Sandra stammered, her heart pounding. "I'll pay you. Whatever you want." His voice was shaking. "There are dangerous people in that room tonight. Business enemies who want to destroy me. They think I'm weak because I have no family, no wife to stand beside me." Sandra stared at him, confused. "I don't understand what you want from me." Michael took a deep breath and looked directly into her eyes. "I need you to pretend to be my wife. Just for tonight. Stand beside me, smile, and convince everyone that I'm not alone." The request was so shocking that Sandra couldn't speak. Why would a billionaire ask a poor waitress to pretend to be his wife? What kind of danger was he really in, and what would happen if she said yes? Sandra's mind raced with 1,000 questions. She looked at the desperate man before her and wondered if this was some kind of joke. But Michael Daniels didn't look like he was joking. His jaw was tight, and his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "Sir, I'm just a waitress," Sandra said softly. "Nobody will believe I'm your wife. Look at me." Michael stepped closer, his eyes urgent. "That's exactly why it will work. You're real. You're honest. Every woman in that ballroom tonight is fake, wearing masks and playing games. My enemies know that. But you're different." Sandra thought about her mother lying in the hospital bed at Port Harcourt General Hospital. The doctors had said they needed money for the surgery by next week, or her mother wouldn't survive. Sandra had been working 3 jobs, but it still wasn't enough. "How much would you pay me?" she asked quietly. "Name your price," Michael replied immediately. Sandra swallowed hard. "My mother needs surgery. The hospital bill is 300,000 naira. I only have 50,000 saved." "Done," Michael said without hesitation. "I'll pay the full bill tonight. Plus another 100,000 for you." Sandra's eyes widened. 400,000 naira. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. It could save her mother and give them a fresh start. But something felt wrong about this whole situation. "Why me?" she asked. "You could ask any woman in that ballroom." Michael's face grew dark. "Because they would want something more than money. They would see this as an opportunity to trap me into a real marriage. But you just want to help your mother. When tonight is over, we both walk away." Before Sandra could respond, loud voices echoed in the hallway outside. Michael grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a large mirror on the wall. "We don't have time," he whispered urgently. "There's a room upstairs with clothes and jewelry. My assistant will help you get ready. Please, Sandra. People's lives depend on this, including mine." Sandra looked at her reflection in the mirror. She saw a tired young woman in a stained uniform, with messy hair and no hope for the future. Then she looked at Michael Daniels, a powerful man brought to his knees by fear and desperation. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Michael's face flooded with relief. He squeezed her hand gently, then led her to a hidden door behind a bookshelf. They climbed a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor, moving quickly through the shadows. Sandra's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. What had she just agreed to? The hidden room on the 2nd floor looked like something from a fairy tale. Racks of beautiful dresses lined the walls, and a table sparkled with expensive jewelry. A woman with kind eyes and gray hair smiled at Sandra as they entered. "This is Margaret, my housekeeper," Michael said. "She'll help you get ready. I have to return to the party before anyone notices I'm gone. I'll send for you in 20 minutes. He left quickly, and Sandra stood frozen in the middle of the room. Margaret walked over and gently touched her shoulder. "Don't be afraid, dear," Margaret said softly. "Mr. Daniels is a good man. He wouldn't ask you to do this if he had any other choice." "Why is he in danger?" Sandra asked as Margaret led her toward the dresses. Margaret's face grew serious. "There's a man downstairs named Richard Thompson. He owns Thompson Industries and he's been trying to destroy Mr. Daniels for years. Tonight, Richard brought his daughter, Victoria, who wants to marry Mr. Daniels for his money. If they think he's alone and vulnerable, they'll strike." Sandra felt fear creep up her spine. "What will they do to him?" "Richard has spies everywhere," Margaret explained, pulling out a stunning red dress. "He steals business secrets and ruins companies. 3 months ago, Mr. Daniels was engaged to a woman named Grace. She seemed perfect, but she was actually working for Richard. She stole important documents and almost destroyed Daniels' holdings." Sandra gasped. "That's terrible." "It broke Mr. Daniels's heart," Margaret continued, helping Sandra out of her uniform. "He hasn't trusted anyone since then. That's why he needs someone like you, someone honest who won't betray him." As Margaret helped Sandra into the red dress, Sandra caught her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her body in all the right places. Margaret styled her hair into soft curls and applied light makeup that made her eyes shine. "One more thing," Margaret said, opening a jewelry box. Inside was a diamond necklace that sparkled like ice in the light. She fastened it around Sandra's neck, and Sandra gasped at its weight. "I can't wear this," Sandra whispered. "What if I lose it?" "You won't," Margaret assured her. "Just remember, tonight you're Mrs. Sandra Daniels. You're strong, confident, and deeply in love with your husband. Can you do that?" Sandra took a deep breath and nodded. A knock sounded at the door and Michael entered. When he saw Sandra, he stopped walking and stared at her with wide eyes. "You look perfect," he breathed. Sandra felt her cheeks grow warm. Michael offered her his arm and she took it carefully. Her legs felt weak as they walked toward the grand staircase leading back to the ballroom. At the top of the stairs, Sandra looked down at the sea of wealthy people below. They were all watching, waiting. Michael squeezed her hand gently. "Ready?" he whispered. Sandra wasn't ready at all, but she nodded anyway. Together, they began to descend the staircase, and every eye in the room turned to stare at the mysterious woman on Michael Daniels's arm. The ballroom fell silent as Sandra and Michael descended the stairs together. Sandra's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her head high and her hand steady on Michael's arm. The diamond necklace felt heavy around her neck, reminding her with every step that this wasn't her real life. When they reached the bottom of the stairs, a tall man with silver hair and cold eyes stepped forward. Sandra knew immediately that this was Richard Thompson. Behind him stood a beautiful woman in a gold dress, watching Sandra with hatred in her eyes. "That must be Victoria, his daughter." "Michael," Richard said with a fake smile. "I didn't know you had remarried. How wonderful." "Yes," Michael replied smoothly, pulling Sandra closer. "Richard Thompson, Victoria Thompson, meet my wife, Sandra." Sandra forced herself to smile. "It's nice to meet you." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she looked Sandra up and down. "How strange that we've never heard of you before. Where did you two meet?" "At a charity event in Port Harcourt," Michael answered quickly. "It was love at first sight." "How romantic," Victoria said, but her voice was dripping with suspicion. "And what do you do, Sandra?" Sandra's mind went blank. What should she say? That she was a waitress who served them drinks an hour ago? Michael squeezed her hand gently, giving her courage. "I work with children," Sandra said, remembering her volunteer work at the orphanage on weekends. "I believe in helping those who have less than we do." Richard laughed coldly. "How noble. But surely Michael's wife should focus on higher society matters. Tell me, Sandra, do you know anything about business?" Sandra felt panic rising in her chest. She knew nothing about business or high society. She was going to expose them both as liars right here in front of everyone. "My wife doesn't need to know about business," Michael said firmly. "She knows about kindness, compassion, and loyalty. Things you wouldn't understand, Richard." The tension between the two men was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other guests began gathering around them, sensing drama. Victoria stepped closer to Sandra, her perfume overwhelming. That's a beautiful necklace, Victoria said sweetly. It looks expensive. I hope you're taking good care of it. Of course, Sandra replied, touching the diamonds nervously. Good, Victoria continued, her smile turning sharp. Because that necklace belonged to Grace, Michael's former fiancée. The one who broke his heart. I wonder why he would give it to you. Sandra's blood ran cold. She looked at Michael, who had gone pale. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how Sandra would respond. Her mind raced, searching for the right words. Was this all a test? Had Michael given her Grace's necklace on purpose, or was it a terrible mistake? And if Victoria knew about Grace, what else did she know? Sandra realized that this fake marriage might be more dangerous than she ever imagined. Sandra felt everyone's eyes burning into her skin. The necklace suddenly felt like a chain around her neck, heavy with secrets and pain. She could feel Michael's body tense beside her, waiting to see if she would break under Victoria's attack. But then Sandra thought about her mother in the hospital. She thought about how Michael had looked when he begged for her help, desperate and alone. She thought about Grace, the woman who had betrayed him and broken his heart. And suddenly Sandra knew exactly what to say. You're right, Sandra said calmly, looking Victoria straight in the eye. This necklace did belong to Grace. Michael told me the whole story. He gave it to me because he wanted to replace the painful memory with something beautiful. He wanted to turn his past betrayal into a symbol of new trust and love. The crowd murmured with approval. Michael stared at Sandra with surprise and gratitude. But Victoria wasn't finished yet. How touching, Victoria sneered. But trust is a funny thing, isn't it? How long have you two been married exactly? 3 weeks, Michael answered smoothly. We wanted to keep it private after everything that happened with Grace. Richard Thompson stepped forward again, his eyes calculating. A private wedding? No annoncement? No celebration? That seems very suspicious, Michael. Almost like you're hiding something. We're not hiding anything, Sandra said boldly, surprising herself with her own courage. We simply wanted to enjoy our happiness without people like you trying to ruin it. Richard's face turned red with anger. Before he could respond, the band started playing a slow, romantic song. Michael turned to Sandra and extended his hand. Would you dance with me, my dear wife? He asked softly. Sandra took his hand and he led her onto the dance floor. As they began to move together, Sandra felt the weight of hundreds of eyes watching them. Michael pulled her close, his hand warm on her back. Thank you, he whispered into her ear. What you said about the necklace was perfect. I didn't even think about it being Grace's until Victoria mentioned it. Is that true? Sandra asked. About replacing the painful memory? Michael looked into her eyes and Sandra saw something there she hadn't expected. Real emotion, real pain. Yes, he said quietly. When I saw you wearing it, it didn't hurt anymore. You made it beautiful again. Sandra's heart fluttered in her chest. This was supposed to be fake, just pretending. But the way Michael looked at her felt dangerously real. They danced in silence for a moment, moving perfectly together as if they had done this 1,000 times before. Sandra, Michael said suddenly, I have a proposal for you. A real one this time. What do you mean? Sandra asked nervously. Michael took a deep breath. Tonight was supposed to end after the party. But Richard and Victoria won't stop with just tonight. They'll investigate you, question everyone, try to prove we're lying. I need this marriage to continue at least for a little while longer. Sandra's feet nearly stopped moving. How long? 1 month, Michael said. Live with me as my wife for 1 month. I'll pay you 100,000 naira plus all your mother's medical bills. We'll sign a contract. No romance, no complications. Just business. After 1 month, we'll quietly divorce and you'll never have to see me again. Sandra's mind spun with confusion and fear. 1 month living as a millionaire's wife? It sounded like a dream and a nightmare all at once. But the money would change her mother's life forever. It would give Sandra a chance to start over, maybe even go back to school. What would happen if she said yes? The first 2 weeks of the contract felt like a dream. Sandra attended charity events on Michael's arm, smiled for cameras, and learned to navigate the world of Lagos's elite. They appeared in newspapers together, and people whispered about the mysterious woman who had captured Michael Daniels' heart. But behind closed doors, something unexpected was happening. Late at night, they would sit in Michael's study and talk for hours. He told her about his childhood, about building his company from nothing, and about Grace, the woman who had nearly destroyed everything he loved. Sandra shared stories about her mother, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and the art she used to create before life became too hard. One evening, Michael showed Sandra a private room filled with paintings. "I want you to have this space," he said softly. "I've seen your sketches. You have a gift, Sandra. Don't let it die." For the first time in years, Sandra felt truly seen. But then everything shattered. Someone leaked photos of Sandra in her waitress uniform from the night of the gala. The headline screamed, "Billionaire's wife was his servant." The media descended like vultures. Reporters camped outside the mansion gates. Social media exploded with accusations and mockery. Richard Thompson appeared on television, smiling coldly. "I always knew something was wrong with that marriage," he said. "Now we all know the truth." Sandra stood in Michael's office, watching the news with tears streaming down her face. "I'm destroying everything you built," she whispered. "No," Michael said firmly, but his voice cracked. "I did this. I brought you into my war." That night, Sandra made her decision. She took off the ring, placed it gently in Michael's hand, and walked away. The contract still had 2 weeks remaining, but some things were more important than money. She couldn't watch him lose everything because of her. 43 days passed. Sandra returned to her small apartment in Surulere, but something inside her had changed. She started painting again, raw, emotional pieces that poured out her heartbreak. A small gallery in Lekki noticed her work and offered her a show. The night of her exhibition arrived. The gallery was packed with people admiring her paintings. One piece drew the most attention: a man standing in the rain, reaching for someone just out of frame. She had titled it "Almost." Then she saw him. Michael stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, staring at her across the crowded room. He walked toward her slowly, and the crowd parted like water. "You left," he said quietly. "You let me," Sandra replied. Michael dropped to one knee right there, pulling out the ring she had returned. "Sandra Collins, you were never part of my plan. But you became my reason. If you'll let me, I want you to be my forever." Sandra dropped to her knees too, cupping his face in her hands. "I don't need a contract anymore. Just you." They kissed while the gallery erupted in applause. This time nothing was pretend. 1 year later they married again, a real wedding with Sandra's mother watching from the front row, healthy and smiling. The pretend marriage had become the most real thing in both their lives. We've come to the end of today's story. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe for more powerful and inspiring stories. See you in the next one.